I'm just thinking about some of the relationships between the senses that we have, the 5 or 6 senses by which we access the world, and a kind of understanding of the ontology of oneself. By self, I'm distinguishing self from body in a way which is kind of naively dualist. I think there's, to the extent that we might want to not feel ourselves to be a dualist, that we might want that sense of self to not be located simply within a defined, isolated, individuated body within an infinite space. One of the ways in which we might want to try to do that is through a kind of suppression or prioritization or kind of synesthetic transformation to do with senses, I think. The sense that we are an individuated being, separate and in this kind of binary dual relationship to the world, that seems to take its logic, to me at least, primarily from the visual sense. Our ability to look out into the world and to pick out objects, pick out trees and telegraph poles and dogs and clouds, and identify them as more or less bounded objects with more or less permanence in space and more or less a fixed location and all those kind of things. That Gestalt understanding of objects is, I would suggest, primarily visual, or at least the visual sense supports that very strongly. And to the extent that we consider ourselves visual objects, or perhaps that we use visual processing methods in the brain to think about what oneself is, it's to that extent that we find ourselves to be individuated objects separate from the environment in which we are lodged, and hence dual. So I think the application of those sort of the visual logic supports dualism. Yeah. To the extent that we might want to suppress that, or we might want to try other ways of being in the world which aren't quite as dualist, it might be interesting to think about ways in which other senses come to the fore. And here I'm reminded actually that I think in some Buddhist writings, that sense of undivided being, in which that separation between self and world isn't operating, that's sometimes referred to as one taste, which I think is really interesting. And we talk about feeling one with everything, or something like that. And the word feeling there is, I would suggest, reminiscent or invocational of a way of approaching the world, which possibly covertly employs the sense of touch rather than the sense of sight. So I think within that, if we are looking, or if we're interested in exploring ways of being in the world in which we are not divided from the world in that sort of figure ground Gestalt way, then we have to come away from the visual sense and try to employ conceptual metaphors of thinking about the world, which are tactile possibly, or olfactory maybe there's a smell sense that can be deployed here, or possibly gustatory and use taste understandings. An interesting sort of flip to that, which I've just been thinking about in terms of this kind of synesthetic transformation of self-understanding, is to do with the meaning response, or how one copes with or interprets the body's feelings. How one, the difference between feeling and perception, I guess, or between feelings and emotions in Damascio's understanding. Because whenever we feel something, it seems to me two things are always going on. There's the thing we feel, which is the actual somatosensory operations that's going on at that moment, and then there's the way we feel about the way we feel. which is our interpretation of it, the meaning response toward it, and all our kind of reactions to it, that kind of thing. And most of the time, certainly from my experience, those two feelings, the way we feel and the way we feel about the way we feel, are inseparable for the most part. Although I know there are techniques, and for example meditation techniques, which are supposed to allow one to make a separation, to hold one's perceptions kind of up in front of oneself, so that one can take a more distanced viewpoint on those, with the potential to control how we feel about the way we feel. So we can, for example, see our pain and be distanced from it, and not be caught up in it, or be distanced from various emotional attachments. And I think what's going on there is the exact reverse of what I was saying about earlier on. It seems to me that what that is a kind of synesthetic redeployment of what is normally a felt sense, in which the way we feel and the way we feel about the way we feel are completely conjoined. And the replacement of that singularity with the dual possibilities of kind of seeing the way we feel, placing the way we feel at a distance, and setting up a duality or a binary distinction between them.